cool spring mornings and cool spring evenings, and we still hear the crickets because there's nothing going on. Just everybody is just having such a great time. Not a problem anywhere. Do you agree with that? Don't you agree with that? Can you agree with that? What are we doing with that? Everywhere we're looking, everything we do appears to be letting the other side, those that would have their way with us, those that would have a better thought than us, what I would consider those that are the occupier, are getting away with it. And us coming late to that party is not going to be an excuse. And I know the subject matter areas of the onslaught are really everywhere, but as I've said before, I think there's enough of us, even in part, I'm not talking even the whole population, there's enough of us that I think if we just turned our attention to what we see wrong and made that part right, that it would start to clean up pretty quickly. And I also realize, because I've been doing this for quite a long time, it's quite a hill to climb. But you know, when you get to the pinnacle, you either stay there or you can go have fun going down the other side as well. And if you just do it just right, you might find another hill to climb, and maybe your momentum will carry you over that one. But we don't know. And if we're never going to start the climb, we can't be complaining about the avalanches that come down, dumping whatever on us, because we were too lazy to make the climb to go find out why someone was kicking stuff down on us. And then, why did we allow ourselves really? We find out we're not really going up a mountain. We're just climbing ourselves out of the stinking abyss that was dug for us, and we accept it as we went. I haven't been talking about this. It's been on quite a few people's discussion times, their broadcasts and their minds and commentaries. I did say that it's a very important thing and people should turn their attention to it. It's the privatization of the government, of the population, into corporate holding, corporate control. And so now we're seeing the time over these years, and it's been slowly moving incrementally, just like they do everything. They've finally getting to the point where that Trans-Pacific Partnership is going to be something. Amongst all the other things that I'm looking at, that's another one of those things that's been sitting. It's, to my mind, and I really haven't been discussing it. I figured other people could do more, better than I could at that point when I'm focusing on other things, and probably still can. I really don't focus on it. I just know what it does. I know what the ramifications are. I know what the international law implications are. I know this is new ground that no one's challenging, and that's our power if we would have known that. At this international corporate trade deal that's being private agreement being made public and thrown upon you as treaty, is a very, very serious matter. That the Senate, for those of you that want to believe in party dealings and that your party, your political beliefs are going to help you because that's the higher ground, your party has the higher ground and the better way to go, and you think that Republicans are conservative, and you don't want to go look at what that might mean, and how, whether or not you've been duped, as I think everyone has, and at some point I had to make that decision and cut ties. It's a system thing that I cut ties from, and then I was able to see it for what it was. That we had this government, federal government, that's been in control by the Republican Party, and there was always a hope that someone in control would do the better thing. You always have that hope and change, hope and change, hope and change. You always have that hope. But the reality becomes pretty quickly evident that the entirety of the federal government, and any government actually now, is taken over by the special interest, and they'll give all the people the warm and fuzzies and the feelings, and yet they won't really give you the fruition And what you find out is that there's something else going on that is really the continuing plunder. And if you want to pull yourself back far enough to look at it, you'll find out the experiment, it seems to me, as I look at a lot of things, the experiment we called America was really the experiment of whether or not a bunch of people would continue in a development corporation that would expand itself and work around and go through time and keep the people that were going to be used as human resource completely dumbfounded and clueless as to what was going on, that they lived in a continuing corporate structure. That corporations would rule eventually. And here we're at that day when the Senate, who's a Republican-based control, is actually moving a fast track to a privatization of a treaty that's going to be imposed upon the United States of America as a government, and that's the people. The Senate passes a bill granting Obama fast track TPP authority. Now, fast track is kind of an interesting problem. And this is where, if you have anything to say, it's time, folks. Step up. Someone's got to step up here. There's enough here. I said there's a target-rich environment for us. They're pushing new ground, and the people that push new ground, the occupiers, do so because there's no resistance. That this fast track actually is an agreement by the Congress, who is actually established by another document called the Constitution. Whether you want to actually see that it works or don't, or only in parts or whatever, it's there to be used as the black and white objective basis from which you can judge the condition. Whether or not that was really a document being used, or it was a prop for your entertainment. And you know, I will sit, it depends on what we are doing, I will sit in the capacity I need to sit and accept what I need to accept in order to advance the repulsion of what we see occupying our lives. That this TPP being fast-tracked means essentially the Senate believes it can amend the Constitution with regard to treaties. That I think if you all would just, someone step up and address this, you possibly could get this into even the corrupt courts to make a point of it. But the Senate does not have the power to fast track, to amend the Constitution, to change what it takes for a treaty to be ratified. That this is on the precipice here, folks. I look at this agreement, and I haven't talked about it, but I figured if you're not, no one's listening, not you, but anybody who's not, and for the most part of most of us, is not listening to me about NDAA, TPP is going to fall right down the toilet like it's made to. And we're going to be on the end of it. We're going to be wrapped up in that TPP, and we're going to be flushed right into the stinking abyss, as I've been telling you, as this financial construct is being made more apparent to us. If the 2009 so-called bubble wasn't clear enough as well. We're given plenty of notice, and I hear crickets, that this fast-tracking appears to me to be a constitutional violation, that someone could step up and say, hey, your fast-track is going to affect me by doing these certain things, and you identify what those are, and you sue to stop that process under fast-tracking. Any one of you can do that right now under a constitutional challenge. Will it stop it? Well, I don't know, but remember, it's a platform, like running for office. You aren't going to win a presidency, but you can surely get a platform to speak about it, and you know how many people and who you might change the opinion of that could cause a change if you couldn't. And I'm also coming, as we do these, the lawsuit that we filed and we prevailed on in a default judgment, it gave me a whole new insight on how to approach this. By not approaching the system at all, or knowing that the system cannot produce the established instrumentalities. And when they can't produce the established instrumentalities and you've invoked it, the system can't answer into that. There's always going to be a default. And if you're since you're men and women moving this, you're the only actual party in the case anyway. Running on what? Your antecedent power. That this TPP and the TPIP, or whatever that is. I don't even look at the letter. It doesn't matter. This is a corporate plunder. That's going to be it's a corporate tyranny. That's really your government anyway. That the people never stepped up into. That we have an opportunity right here to jump in and say, hey, your fast tracking is unconstitutional because the creatures of the Constitution have no power to change that Constitution outside of the constraints of the Constitution. That if you don't, life as we know it, and the things you think you have, and all my words about all your antecedent rights, become so much more impossible to impose on something as weird as this Trans-Pacific Partnership. You would think that, I mean, to me, I would want the nations to have commerce that was equitable, let's put it that way. I have no problem with that part. But it's what it does internally and what you can't do anymore by it that is being disregarded by these Republican-controlled federal government. The Democrats are no better. Like I said, we sued both the parties because they are used as a tool to undermine your Republican form of representative government. In fact, they're using that representation as the license to do what they're doing. And so when you start understanding these tools were set out against you and have been used against you if they weren't that way, you also understand that you have to come at this whole condition a lot better. And your excuses to not respond are not going to save us. That's just the point of it. I don't know how else to say that. And lots of knowledgeable people that just will say, oh, there was nothing I could do because I know it's all corrupt. Well, I know it's all corrupt and we're doing tons. Now, I can only do so much, so that's my frustration. I really wish I could go everywhere I see my mind goes. My mind works in an instant. The matter around me takes a whole lot longer to get there. I can just tell you that. And I'm sure for those of you that see this, it's the same way. And that frustration's enough to back you off. I'm asking you, for those of you that really see this, you can't. This TPP, though, has an interesting problem that propped up that is give us insight as to what this corporate construct is all about, what they're actually doing. And because it's really beyond us at some level, and it's all secret, and the Senate believes that they should do that, it should be secret. Apparently there's some national security implications on a trade deal. Well, it should really the idea of that should just bother you to no end also. When you find out that, like Clint Richardson's Corporation Nation, when you find out that the government's actually the corporation that's actually allowing these corporations, and the bottom line is the bottom line, and that this is what they're talking about, that's the national interest. It's not defending your borders. It's the bottom line. That you start finding out that maybe the setup is a setup. It's a setup, it's fixed. The fix is in, and you being quiet is not going to change any of that. Again, the withdraw, united we strike, withdraw, don't buy, don't comply, ask why, withdraw, rethink, and then re-engage. You don't comply by engaging where you need to be acting, not just sit back and contemplating your navel. That an interesting thing came out of what the news about this TPP and the fast tracking. First of all, I think it's unconstitutional. You should find that too. You should find out how treaties are going to be adopted and find out that this is a problem. That secrecy, the ruling, and I have another report here down the road. The secrecy, the lack of transparency that was not voted on. There was a bill to vote in transparency so people could see into this, was not voted and agreed to. This is new ground as well. How do you have a law that's supposed to be put on the people that is not given disclosure to the people? And this is where you see your power of representation being used to its ultimate, that if you don't speak on that purported representation, then you are going to be the crickets again. So the other thing here that remember, the Constitution Amendment 17 gave the power of the selection of the senators to the people, the popular vote, which really was a violation. We really should have never went there. I can see that locally now in your states. Your states should be not represented by the popular vote. They should be representing your county. Those senators should be representing your counties. And they should have no party affiliation. And so by putting the popular vote on certain aspects of the government, you diminish the power of the government to be the government that it needs to in order to protect itself from the mob rule that we find. Those that are politically oriented together with the same ideologies, even though they might be different parties, that can run roughshod over this whole thing and get away with it. And we sit there like it's a blizzard in our face, just wondering when we're going to warm up, instead of saying, wait a minute, there's somebody doing that. This TPP fast tracking came up with it. It's an interesting problem. During the voting of it and the whatever all they're doing, the parts that they're doing out in the public, there was a key crackdown legislation that was involved in this bill for human trafficking. Now, when I say human resource, I'm telling you that is the government's acknowledgement that they're trafficking in you. They deem you to be a beast of burden, financial beast of burden, and they're sucking and parasitically eating off of your life, and they're determining what your life's going to be like. As you saw in the EU, as soon as they made that veneer government over all the European nations, they then moved everybody around and directed people. And if you didn't go, you didn't get to work. You starved to death. As we saw, the manifestation of what that actual human workforce productivity is all about, and how governments can come together to tell you what to do in your life. That human trafficking is what they're doing here. Human trafficking is the bottom line, it seems to me. Despite the laws against involuntary servitude, they've got a presumption that if you continue without complaint, then you're agreeing. It's not involuntary. Then it's voluntary. That inside this discussion was this a legislation to stop human trafficking, and I found this very important. And you got to listen to this very carefully. And boy, you got to really think about what's going to be said here. You got to reflect upon this and what this means the United States government is actually doing when it has a problem with this cracking down on human trafficking. That the White House, in this fast-tracking problem, and then with this bill, this TPP that's going through, the White House considers the provision for the crackdown on human trafficking to be a deal breaker. The unqualified one and his administration is not liking the crackdown, the restriction for the legalization. It should have been even it have to be stated, folks. That it has to be stated shows you there's a main problem. But that they're going to make it illegal for human trafficking is a deal breaker for this unqualified one in his administration. A deal breaker that says that this TPP can't go forward with anybody that's going to be involved in human trafficking. And the White House considered that provision a deal breaker because it would force one of the nations involved in the TPP talks, Malaysia, out of the agreement. Think about that. The United States doesn't want this crackdown because it would force Malaysia out of the agreement. Isn't that ironic, folks? But the White House is not like that a nation known to be human trafficking, at least outwardly, at least not by the way of the system, that the White House doesn't like the deal because it would require that some nation who deals in human trafficking would not be allowed into the TPP. Should tell you what the TPP and the TPIP is all about. It's about human trafficking. In the United States, it's like privateering in the Constitution. The United States cannot sign any agreement or treaty that prohibits pirateering. Pirates, actually. It can't agree to that. Why? Because the provision in the Constitution says that the United States can enter into letters of marque for privateers. That's pirating for the state. And so they can't agree to that, like this one. They don't like it because another human trafficking nation will be out of the agreement. That should kind of, if you hadn't heard that before, it startled you that the unqualified one in this government agrees with human traffickers. And that's okay in that agreement. So that's a major disclosure here. Now, whether or not it's going to be enough to stop this whole thing, I don't know. The point is, that's what's going on. This is what you're looking at in the TPP. You have evidence of it right here. You could put that in your facts. You could move to stop this because the fast tracking of this bill, the secrecy of this bill is arbitrary and capricious upon no point other than it would expose the crimes that are being brought through the color of this authority and then not actually voted on in a constitutional manner. So you either have the acknowledgement at the end that you don't live in a constitutional Republican government in the United States, and that human trafficking is the law, or this thing gets stopped. Now, either way, I'd be okay with either answer because then I would know. I would know we live in a slave state, as those of us that see that and can prove it in 5 or 6 different ways, would agree what has always been on us, and we're just finding that out, or we would call out the problem, and at least they'd be too embarrassed to continue, at least in that moment. That if you remain silent, that this is like a waiver on a plea agreement, a plea agreement or an entry of plea, you waive all the defects by letting it go past you. The crackdown on human trafficking is a deal breaker for the White House because it would force out one of the nations that does known human trafficking out of the agreement of the TPP. Should really bother you. It was I had to smile, not because I think it's funny, because there it is, confirmation again. You live in a prison planet, you live in that plantation state. They supplantation of law. You now live in that law, that plantation law. You now live in the occupying force, and you're crickets. And so there's no international recognition of your silence other than you've agreed. And I don't know what more to say to you about that part. And in fact, Zero Hedge was a talk, if I remember now that I'm looking at my tab here, how media deceive in public about fast track and the trade bills, so-called trade. They did a good write-up about it. In fact, they've also identified that it's a Constitution violation. I'm telling you, the news is here to give you the list of things you can put together and bring this out, make a platform for yourself, and address these things and get a wider audience. There's enough information on the around that you can make a case for yourself. And I ask you, if you're out of work, you're in a better position because if you're out of work for a long time, you probably don't have a whole lot, and therefore your fees are going to be zero. You just waive them. And it's about you running your own case through. Why? You can't go to the attorneys because they're the ones that are promoting this. They're the ones that wrote up all those fancy bills and do all the loopholes, don't they, on the TPP? They're on the inside. They're the ones sitting in the seat of decision, the Senate. Now let's get back to that Senate. What else can you do, folks? You can run right down back to your state. Now, the 17th Amendment I talked about was the popular vote. That should have actually been assigned by the Senates of the states to be doing that, to protect the state's interest. And what's in there? Well, it's a bunch of corruption. Well, no, it's not actually, but that's who's sitting in the seat of decision. What's actually supposed to be working is a protection to the people and the producers and the property owners in the states, the front line of which is your county. But you go into your state and you rally up, folks. It's time. And you amass a communications nightmare. Like, I was excited a bit about when Ron Paul was going through. It wasn't because I thought he was going to do anything, and it wasn't because I thought he was actually telling us some of the truth. I think there was a lie within Ron Paul. Remember, Dr. No, he could be Dr. No. He knew that it didn't matter that he was Dr. No, because all the money that would have been assigned to his district was going to come his way anyway, and he could still be Dr. No. Kind of what his son's doing right now, Rand Paul. He knows he's not going to win the argument, but he can look like the champion trying. And he knows the outcome's not going to be there, so he's using it for a false purpose. That you can now do it for the purpose that it was meant for, that you amass up your communication lines again, like I was seeing back, it was when I first started broadcasting, and seeing all the excitement that has just bled away. Pull all together all that coagulated blood now, let's pump it back into a body, let's manifest some kind of a Frankenstein of our own and get it animated again, and go back to your states Whether this will work or not, you make the noise about it and you put it in earnest. That you tell your states to recall their senators right now. So they can't make their votes. Doesn't matter how fast the track is. They're not going to be there to see it. You have the states recall their senators. Why? Because then they can't do the treaty. It can't be ratified. You explain how that is not representing you, and you demand that representation in the Senate to be withdrawn from the Senate. Will it work? Well, I don't know. Probably not. But you know what? It may work. The other thing is you start showing people if you do it in a nice, organized manner, and you start getting some traction, you start teaching people what they're supposed to be doing as well. Maybe you get a few more people to tie on. Maybe as you're educating how bad this thing is and all the rights you're going to not be able to have, all the things that all these other groups have been working for, like the GMO labeling, you're going to find out that all that work was for naught. Maybe those people would put some elbow grease behind the energy to withdraw the senators from the Senate in each state, sufficiently to kill this whole thing. Why? You just point out that what they're doing is illegal, and they're representing the state in illegality in the first instance. That should be enough. Should be enough. Maybe it's not. You have 5 or 6 more things you can put on a list of causes. A bill of particulars, they call it. So Zero Edge has a little good discussion, and they bring up the constitutional aspects, and they bring up also, and look at very carefully, you'll see that this is a unique condition where they're doing this and the lack of transparency, and all these other things that's going on that make it challengeable, at least, that allow you to be able to challenge it as well. And as he has been in the recent past, John Rappaport has got a key source clues me in on the TPP Code of Silence. And this is an interesting discussion I thought that you might want to see. If you're in earnest about protecting yourself and protecting those around you, you absolutely have to stop making excuses for having it go against us, and take the steps it takes. And it's not about winning, it's about engaging. I suspect that enough engagement and proper engagement, as we're finding as we do this property disposal law and all this other stuff, will have a force and effect. I can tell you we've absolutely been changing minds here lately, as of late, in an accelerated fashion. But Rappaport goes on to say in a part of what he's written, in the United States, senators who must vote for a treaty in order for it to pass go into a sealed room and look at the text, excerpts from drafts, summations, and then emerge knowing they can be arrested if they open their mouths to anyone. A source close to the treaty negotiations has given me the legal basis for this law of omerta, the national security classification that designates levels of secrecy for government data. What? That old justification? Yes, the relevant laws and regulations are long-standing. They are enforced by the Department of Justice. Okay, don't everybody laugh at once. Department of Justice. Various levels of classification data are set by agencies within the executive branch. Well, that's a very interesting, really there's supposed to be an administrative procedure for that as well. You can go after this thing administratively. I asked this source, he has read TPP draft sections and summaries, that what the punishment would be for revealing what he knows. He laughed. I'm not about to find out, he said. Applying secret, top secret, or other classifications to a treaty that must be voted on in order to become law is a unique situation. And that I keyed on was for you. It's unique. This is something that needs to be challenged, not let by. It's one of the main causes for bringing it through. And I've suggested to you that the standard that these classifications have made is fraudulent. And without a public awareness of what it is, it's also secret. And nothing in the administrative side is supposed to be secret at all. So we've got a lot of foothold here and handholds to try and climb back out of the stinking abyss we're allowing ourselves to slide into. Because it goes on to write, it's one thing for the federal scientists, it's one thing to say a federal scientist can't publicly publish details on how to build an H-bomb, it's quite another thing to say United States senators can't reveal to the American people what they're voting on. There is no constitutional basis for such an assertion. In fact, it's a direct violation of the separation of powers principle. By assigning national security secrecy status to the details of the TPP, the executive branch is arbitrarily muzzling the Congress. We're witnessing a stunning farce. Now, that gives quite a few more points that you could put together as a cause to get the platform in order to out what's going on. And remember, if you claim a representative, they're claiming a representative status for you. If you're silent, that's what speaks. When you come to say, no, that's not representative of me. Now we have the point of the contention, and the issue comes. Since I've claimed it isn't, and no one knows, and no one can see. How do you know you are representing me? How can you represent me? How isn't your representation a color of law fraud? You starts bringing these up, and you start making people aware of the points in nice, simple sentences, and you stop making all this stuff so convoluted for people that you start hopefully, be the example to start showing people they too have a voice that we hear all the time. You become your own voice. There's a plenty here that's unique, that's not really supposed to happen, that is facially a violation. That you create the platform to explain it to other people, because, as I've said before, it's not about the institutions. It's about getting enough perceptive proof beyond the meme, beyond the propaganda, beyond the advertisement, beyond the promotion, to crack through that to people and then get them righteously and indignantly pissed off. Because right now the occupying force knows it's not supposed to piss off the natives. And they've got that pretty well sealed until someone can crack that porcelain. And it's not going to be cracked by crickets. Now, what's the ramifications to you locally? Now, all y'all working, and I told you, just ban the dang GMOs right now for food and all this other stuff and growing, and we'll be done with it. You don't have to label what you banned. Russia found, a lot of countries have found, lots and lots of countries have found that to be the fact. So all y'all that are working for things to be put into regulations that are going to work against these corporations in these international trade deals that want to include nations that are outwardly agreeable to their human slavery conditions. Now, the United States is it's the same type of entity, but they've done it more legal-like. So no one knows that they're all part of a slave system. But the pressure that's coming on to this, and what comes out of this for you, is the in secret, the lobbying behind this, to show you where this is going to go once these style trade agreements are put in place. Even before they're in place, this veneer called the European Union that put a lid on all the independent nations. Again, as a plan, we could read this way back in the 20s and 30s and 40s and then 50s, or the 40s and 50s are the agreements that made them more solid, to bring all this on, to shove us all down, all the people down, and empower a few in control of the globe. Pretty fascinating how they've done it globally. EU, the pressure, before this even becomes anything, the EU drops the pesticide laws due to the United States pressure over TTIP documents. Reveal. This is already pressure. If you think you're going to be able to get pesticide like glyphosate that we're finding is absolutely poison to people, absolutely poison to nature. In fact, I sent off a Twitter. Behind a Woodshed is my account. If you want to see what little bit I'm doing a lot less now on Twitter anymore. I've got so much work we're doing during the week, advancing the point that we're trying to advance and getting somewhere, that I'm focusing a lot of my attention on that. But last night, as I was preparing for the broadcast, I ran across this video of someone, a scientist who understands a lot of this and can, in a concise way, explain it to us, what's going on, and explain to me that in 1964, this glyphosate was a steam boiler cleaner, a descaler. And Monsanto picked it up and re-engineered it to be able to redefine it as an herbicide. Because what it does very, very, very well, And it's a really simple process. It binds up with minerals. Like all the elemental minerals of the elemental chart, the metals, it binds up with those. Well, those happen to be required in all your enzymes. It binds up very aggressively with minerals, the mineral cores of which make up the starting of your enzymes, which causes all your most all your proteins and all your other functions in your body. It's an interrupter because it binds with that process. It works really good at that. So these pesticides, this is glyphosate, that already, before this is even a treaty that's been signed, the EU dropped any pesticide laws that would limit this. Now, if you folks think that when this goes into place, if you don't turn your attention to this, now that we've seen where it's right on the table now. It's time to move, I think, and this is why I've been waiting. It didn't matter what they were leading up to. It's time to move when it's time to move. Here it is. That if you think you're going to do something in your little local areas to stop this, you might as well just start another fairy tale book or something, because this is where you're seeing whatever you think you're doing now locally is going to be trumped by this thing, and it becomes a much more difficult, if you can. They're going to say it's a treaty. They can't get around it. People won't, if they can't step up right now to enforce the Constitution, they're not going to step up the provision that says the treaties can't undermine your local rights. And people haven't gone to the red legislators and said, I have a right to clean food. If you have to say that, no one's done it. To empower this point before the fact that this EU was dropping all pesticides laws that would have been contrary to business, the business of selling poisons. And glyphosate's not the only one, folks, and Monsanto's not the only one. I mean, there's just dozens and dozens and dozens of these multinational corporations that make money on poisoning life and calling that good. That you have to understand that if they were pressured to drop the pesticide laws, which would allow something like glyphosate to come in, then that is what is going to be allowed in the TPIP, at least, and I can't see it being any different, to give you an indication that this is evidence. If you didn't even know about what was in it and the secrecy around it, you can extract that fact from this point as a cause. You could list it down. Again, before this is even a treaty, it's already having effects that there's no laws that are going to come against it to diminish it. It's almost like a Chapter 11 in the NAFTA. You interfere with somebody's business. It's why the Patriots, so-called the Tea Party, don't understand why Mexico drivers can come across the border and not have to be licensed, not have to be citizens, not have to be anything, because they are tied to a commerce activity in Mexico. The diminishment of which is actionable by Mexico on NAFTA, interfering with their trade. So that points to your driver's license as a commerce thing. So what else is going on? What's already happening before this is coming on now? They're fast-tracking it. Unconstitutional. This is all adjunct policy. It's another thing I'll tell you about. Why I can tell you why we sued what we did and go sustainable development. This is part of that. Adjunct policy. It's non-constitutional. It's all done as they can shove it through, no different than any occupying force coming in and having their way and the people not resisting. Another thing that came up this week, all at the same time, World Trade Organization overrules United States Court of Origin rules for meat products. So notwithstanding the fact that the EU is going to pull back pesticides, if you think you're going to know where your meat comes from in this globally produced feed, you better think again. Now remember, this was the food security bill way back in 2010 or 11, I think, and we were talking about it behind the Woodshed. Way back when. And I told you this is the food security bill, and this is part of the sustainable development. Be careful. There's a list of 5 things. It had to do with housing. It has to do with your food. It has to do with your water. All this stuff. On and on and on. All security stuff. It's nothing. It's a lie. It's just the way they make you feel warm and fuzzy like they're doing something. But there was a rule in there for the USDA to look out into the world and look at things coming in, and they had to qualify what it was that the World Trade Organization overrules the U.S. origin rules for that you will not know of where your meat's coming from, and that will go for everything. Again, if they can do one, they can do it all. that you need to understand they're after your food. They've been taking your food and they're making it feed. If you think you're going to understand, you sit in the prison that you live in, it's called the United States of America, the open-air prison that you don't know exists. If you think you're going to be able to know where that bologna sandwich came from, think again. You think you're going to be able to figure out all that Fukushima fish? Not from California. I mean the ones right off the coast of Fukushima that are getting in the water over there. You think you're going to be able, they're going to give you any care that you say, hey, wait a minute, I've got irradiated fish sticks here from your McDonald's sales that I have to buy because that's all I can go and get? Where did this stuff come from? You're not going to get to know. This is already in the works, already happening, and these trade bills are not even they're still not even formulated. This is another thing now. You're going to be tied into the world order, the World Trade Organization. Where do you think all this comes from? But through the IMF and things like that. So keep quiet, keep being crickets, keep making excuses. And don't be surprised. But don't be surprised. You start eating bologna, and it glows in the dark, and you can't say boo about it. I don't want to hear it in the future. So, what have I given you today? We go after them. You do stand up on your own, do what you can, go into the courts, go to your and make a platform, sue to stop it, figure out your standing. They're going to try and kick you out for standing, like you don't have a say. You're going to have to tie yourself into that. You also can go to your state and withdraw the senators so that they can't vote, and make it for good. Make it for good reasons. You have to establish that the state's there for you, not for the corporations. So this is up to us. If we don't say it, it's going to come down on us. You're not going to know where your food's coming from. You're not going to be able to know what's in your food. You're not going to know. Another thing is we're finding out now, and I just found out in that video. I didn't know this. I thought we were pretty safe at cane sugar because it's not genetically modified yet. But I just found out that no different than the wheat. I told you they use glyphosate on to desiccate the plant to make it easier to harvest. So there's residues of glyphosate on the wheat, which is probably what's actually causing the problems for people. It's this glyphosate mineral absorption and binding that ruins your gut material, your gut bacteria and gut conditions and gut environment. That it's on sugarcane too. They do the same thing for the sugarcane. So it's not the GMO at that point, it's this glyphosate. And that glyphosate is it works excellent for what it was designed for in 1964 as a boiler descaler because it binds so aggressively with minerals. Now I see the tab here, that the Senate, the Republicans, if you thought they were looking out for you, again, the Democrats are the same way, there's no different here, but it happens to be the Republicans get to do this time. They get to burn their end of the candle a little quicker now. I told you, America that you thought of is a candle being burnt on both ends by the political parties. They just have their own direction that they're going in order to burn that candle. Well, right now the Republicans are burning that candle and burning up as a heat of fury here, and they don't want anybody to see what's in these trade acts, and so they blocked a transparency bill that would make it it would make it transparent in the way they tell you. I tell you, it's transparent now because you can't see it, but they're talking about making it available. So we have how do you know your representative's representing you when they when they can only see pieces and parts and can't see the whole thing and can't see the whole picture and don't have an idea of how it comprehensively works? We're still back in the same stuff. Well, you have to pass a law so we can see what's in it nonsense. Pelosi now being adopted by Boner, Same thing. It's the same setup. Different party, same thing. The senators again need to be recalled from the Senate because they're not representing the state interest in protecting its people. When they allow the executive branch to put them underneath agreements without defunding everything that's going on immediately because it's a transgression. Remember, and I found this when we did our case, something you learn as you keep researching. It makes sense after you hear it, but it didn't originate itself as an originating thought to me until I read it from a court case, that each branch has an inherent duty. It's not a stated duty. It's not going to be found in the Constitution, but because of the tripartite nature of a Republican form of representative government, each branch has an inherent duty and obligation to check the other branches. That they are derelict, the senators are derelict to have done that, which is another cause for you. If you're taking notes, I'm giving you the list of causes that you bring a case. If you just go back through the broadcast and list these things out. And that's a simple little statement. The senator is derelict to enforce his inherent right to protect the state in these capacities. Be careful, though. That state might be underneath the delusion they want these kinds of trade deals. See, be careful. You may have another problem in your state to have to overcome as well. That's why it starts taking people. So I've given you another way. We want to pull these senators out. Then if they're not there to vote, they don't got no vote. You don't have enough votes, then it don't matter, does it? Doesn't matter. There's not going to be enough votes to making it work. So we have a couple of things we can do, if nothing more, to show we have a spine in us left, at least. Do it for yourself. That's what I ask you to do. Really do it for yourself. It's enlightening. It's enlightening to you. It's empowering. Again, we don't necessarily go into every battle and win, but we go in and we do our best and we survive. And we'll do better than that. I'm sure of it. I'm sure of it. So one of the things I suggested was going into the courts, and I've also told you we know the corruption, we know of the corruption, but that's all part of the thing. When you know the game plan and how it works, you can use that to your advantage. And so lots of people say, oh, I can't do that. Well, a lot of you can't do it anyway, but I mean, you won't do it because you think you know how to do it, and it won't come to any good. I say use it as a platform like you would a political office. Whether or not you're going to win, you at least got a place to get the word out of what you're trying to say. Maybe you only convince maybe 2,000 people. That's 2,000 people than what happened before you opened your mouth. So you go to a court case and you learn how to run it, and you put it in, and you do what you can. But they're corrupt. They're going to do an outcome, and we know that because we understand that when I talk about sustainable development, there's outcome-based stuff. It's all outcome-based. It's all consensus-driven. It's all reflexive law will be coming on to us here pretty soon. Again, the seated decision will have that power. And who is it but the Bar Association, who the House of Delegates have agreed, and by resolution, to support the Rio Accord, the Johannesburg Agreement. So that's sustainable development, folks. This is what the Bar Association do. Well, the implementation plan is our Agenda 21. You can find the book now. William Roberts talked about it all the time. As I've told you before, he came at it from the book. I came at it from international law. We happened to meet shoulder to shoulder, looking in the same stinking abyss and say, oh, this is what this is. That the Agenda 21, Chapter 7 says there's no property. Any of you believe that your property, you have property to protect, and you go to the Bar Association looking for a remedy, you're deluded. That whole system is that corrupt. But if you know that, see, then, and you understand about some jurisdictions, is what we did, we can kind of get around that, and we just remove that whole issue from the corrupted part by challenging it. There's ways to do that. But one thing that I've been, I rail against is for us, and about this going to the courts, is us being the victim of that court. And being victim to the stupidity of the jury anymore. The juries are not intelligent whatsoever. And I've pointed out to you, they're a privileged people. They're the commerce entities that are profiting from the use of their highway. They're deemed to be businesses. Everyone who has a driver's license is deemed to be a business, using the highways for profit. Every one of you. That you get chosen from that motor vehicle pool for juries. It isn't a qualification for awareness and uniqueness and common law sense. It's not a test. That driver's license is not a test for how good you're deciding. It's strictly a pool of people that probably don't know better. And so now you walk into a court of law, and the judge is supposedly sitting, you think that they're sitting there to do justice and make it fair and make the whole proceeding fair, and you think the prosecutor's there only prosecuting and never persecuting. Not like if you look at his normal prosecutor's record, 98.2% should warn you off of anything that you thought was justice to begin with. But even so, looking at these things, I do not like, when I find, despite the fact I'm telling you, go to those same courts, and really it's just to expose them. It exposes this whole thing, because my whole job, it seems anymore, is to hope people are watching while we start showing that the emperor wears no clothes. Now, we're not going to get a complete compliance. Even once you expose it, not everyone's going to agree to watch or even think about it once they see it, but you grab some. And so this is a long-term game, like I've been telling you. You're in that race, folks. Don't stop running. First of all, you're running whether you think you're sitting or not. You're in that race, or you're standing there. You're standing on the track. You better start running. So I ask you, just get involved. Find something to do and do it. But what came across the tabs here in a report and a story, again, was an injustice, despite the subject matter. It's the injustice of that complete system that you have to be aware is there, and it's what you're up against as the system turns down upon us on what really is going to happen. And if you don't have that in your mind, you just become a complete victim to it, and you don't even use it as a grounds for the platform it ought to be to expose it as well. And I say that I've got to get back to them. I was just exposed to a miner who has some problems, and they didn't take any opportunity to make a platform to protect themselves. And so now the work really got to roll your sleeves up when you don't protect yourself, and you're up against that corrupt system. They just have their way with you. So this is what I'm responding to in this case. Moving on now, satanic daycare operators. Satanic is in quotes, because that's how it was promoted by the persecutor in chief, and by the judge allowing this in the original. This is along the lines of putting someone in jail for 30 years for murder, and they didn't do any of it. Because this is now you can just be alleged by some statement coming from somebody, and this happens to be from little 3-year-olds and 4-year-olds. Satanic daycare operators' conviction is tossed. So if you're not gearing up for this, and they do this at all levels, essentially you're part of that problem too, because it's going to require that we step up. But you will become the victim to your own ignorance and the aggression of the occupier. That it was found out after some time, upon false evidence, no less. And against a claim of innocence, I tell you, don't plead innocence, do you? You plead not guilty. There's some people in Texas who are called Fran and Dan Keller, who were told that they had done some pretty terrible things. They put one in one of the things, unspeakable acts against their charges. Their charges were this daycare. That they put one baby apparently in a swimming pool with baby-eating shark. They forced the kids to watch as they dismembered an infant. They flew the children to Mexico, where they were raped by soldiers, before flying them back to the daycare in time to be picked up by their parents. This was put out in the case. This is allowed to be heard. This is a testimony done by the little ones. Think about this. A jury oversaw all this as well, if you think there's a protection there. Except possibly, just maybe, perhaps, none of that ever happened. Incredibly, even though the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals on Wednesday overturned the charges against Fran Keller because of false evidence, the court denied her claims of actual innocence. The Kellers were sentenced in 1992 to 48 years in prison after 3 children at the daycare made outlandish allegations of ritualized torture, and an emergency room physician, a certified one, a license holder, folks, licensed by the state. If you don't think this is a closed system, and an emergency room physician testified that the injuries to the 3-year-old accuser's hymen was consistent with sexual abuse. The prosecution also presented expert. You know behind the woodshed what we know about experts. Witness a therapist and psychologist. These are the same people that kill 500,000 people a year on psychotic drug prescriptions, who testified to the prevalence of the satanic cult. Now, the prevalence, folks, he testified just to the prevalence of satanic cults. And all this was used to convict these people. And the court came back and said that was just so outlandish. It should have been unbelievable. And I'm telling you, but it wasn't. Judge Cheryl Johnson was apparently baffled by her colleague's reasoning. She wrote in a concurring opinion, in other words, concurring that it needed to be overthrown and reverse the decision, but outlandish, the reasoning being questioned as to the reasoning behind why they reversed. She looked and said the court should go ahead and find Keller innocent. But this was a witch hunt from the beginning, she wrote, before rattling off the list of three-year-old accusers' stories. She asserted that Keller had come to her house and had cut her dog's vagina with a chainsaw until it bled, that she was taken to a cemetery where, after being dressed like a policeman threw a person a person into a hole, Daniel Keller shot the person who had then was thrown into the hole and cut the body up with a chainsaw while all the children helped. She also alleged that Keller served blood-laced Kool-Aid, forced the children to have videotaped sex with adults and other children, sometimes wore white robes, and lit candles before hurting the children. This came out in trial, folks, and this judge, after appeal, this wasn't caught at the trial, this wasn't caught by the judge, this was allowed. And this was all thrown out there, and as I'm reading this list of things, I know I don't remember when I was 3 years old, but folks, I don't think this stuff would have ever come to my mind. That reality got disconnected as well. And the jury of the peers here didn't catch it. Notwithstanding, what does a 3-year-old know than possibly and probably more of what they were told in describing these things? And the justice system failed completely here. So notwithstanding the satanic discussion, and this was coming at the end also, this was a case that was happening back, remember, in 1992. These people have been hanging out all this time, waiting to find out whether or not this was going to work, or go against them or not. And this was also at the time of that other the child daycare center, when this country was kind of on a satanic cult nonsense. Although, we weren't there. I didn't hear all the good evidence, and it sure sounded like some of it was plausible. Kind of scary, wasn't it? But this has also got wrapped up, but the court never, ever straightened it out. And I don't know if I'm going to get to it today, but there's someone who wrote, I think they're starting to feel bad, an attorney, writing quite a discussion on how the lawyers are failing utterly. Failing utterly. And so if you rely, again, I'd like to say we could rely on him. I would like to have a champion who is a trained champion, even if we put it in the Esquire mode, that he's been training underneath us. He's been training underneath a knight as an Esquire to defend you. Now, do you want an Esquire defending you, or do you want the knight defending you, first of all? But you'd think there'd be this knight out there that's going to defend your champion your law, your rights, and your property. They're not there, folks. So, here's the evidence more about that we need to step up to do what we can, and I know we're doing what we can. We're definitely on this part. This is one of the things that we do discuss. This is one of the things we did sue. This is one of the things we have a default judgment on. The Bar Association and the political parties is supposedly representing you. And you see this nonsense coming down and the allowance of what they're doing. And I hear crickets. I'm trying to listen for others, but there's not that much more noise. It's just crickets. It's inaction. And the warm summer nights are coming, so it doesn't look like it's going to get much better for us. And yet the evidence is there to out all these people. we need to pick these people up in what they produce and write, and put that together for ourselves to protect us and protect our little ones and protect our neighbors' little ones if they don't know, or just to explain to our neighbors what the deal is and why they should be concerned. But moving on into, there are people out there that are in the system that have experience that are not taking it anymore. Like that attorney that was making that writing, I may or may not get to here. Harvard-trained immunologist demolishes California legislation that terminates vaccine exemptions. Vaccine exemptions. They're going to get rid of all that for you, folks. Now, we've talked about some remedies, some things what you can do on the senators and the trade, the TPP, and the constitutionality of it all, and maybe integrating with a mobile force, getting integrated back and getting back into your states, and really causing a backflash on all this. But something's gone on in California, or a bill's gone into effect. They're thinking very seriously getting rid of these exemptions. They'll make you a criminal for not getting a vaccine that you know is a crime against you. But there's evidence that you can use that was written by a doctor. I wouldn't try to pronounce the name. You'll get the link in the post-production broadcaster for those of you that wish to. If you really, my broadcaster page has got all these links. It's all information for you to collect up. If you're not going there, you're missing out on a ton of stuff. And if you're not going there, then you're probably not engaging yourself. And I don't know, folks. If you're not engaging yourself, what are you doing? What are you doing? I mean, if you hang around, what are you doing? If you're just hanging around, then you're just hanging around. If you've given up or you don't think there's a remedy, then what are you listening for? What are you even involved? What do you even have a thought about? What is your example? Now, I've had to look at this and say, well, I could go do lots of other things, but if I do, then this terrible condition comes upon me as well. As I told you before, it's somewhat of a selfish thing. I don't want it coming on me, but I'm only me, and so I'll do what I can, but I mean, that's not going to stop much. Especially when you actually live in mob rule and figure that out. But all it takes is one more than half, and that's good enough to take all your rights away, even though the people that are saying that have no right to do that. No one calls out that felony. But this doctor has stated for your use that how this legislation really is criminal, and what it does and doesn't do, and what it anticipates that it can't. And so if you didn't have that in you, and you didn't understand how to make the case, you could take this and start to build your case. If not, contact the doctor and get him on your side, or get jumping in with whatever he's got in order to stop this, because it's coming up here, folks. The other thing you all get to do is vote with your feet. And that's what seems to be the threat of this bill is such that there may be a lot of people in California that are going to have to leave the state. Now, I can't imagine the cost of that, folks, and I can't imagine the harm. It's not a harm necessarily. It can be turned out to be a good thing, but it's problematic to move a family. The expenses, all the reorientation, the new lifestyle, the new people. It's a little tougher on little ones, but because of this imposition. Because there's no mobile action against this insanity, against this crime against the people, in favor of the vaccine companies, in favor of federal imposed immunities, in favor of the ramifications that come from the vaccines not working and causing worse trouble, so that the pharmacology people, the companies, the industry gets more money from you. You see the bottom line working here as well. That people are getting ready to move with their feet. Wave of medical police state refugees to flee California if SB 277 signed into law. Governor Brown to declare war on children. No child safe. Probably not so much actually a sensational comment, even though A lot of times I hear that from this website. What I noticed was the police state refugees. If you didn't think as I told you a long time ago, that Gaza was the open-air prison, the mirror of the United States of America, now we see California. Remember now, Jade Helm is pointing out that the lower part of California is representing a little bit of Gaza. It's kind of neat how all this kind of falls together for you if you're paying attention. Governor Brown's declaring war on so-called children. He wouldn't be declaring war on children. Those are wards of the state. He's not declaring war on them. He's declaring war on your sons and daughters. Now, the only other thing then is that you have to, I don't think that there's still the problem. That's only for if you go to public school. So that's the other answer, folks. You don't necessarily have to move. What expense would it be just to not move and just educate your own little ones? Maybe that's another answer. But if you act en masse, maybe you'll have a better chance here. That these bills that are coming down are still all part and parcel to a TPP and TPIP type of insurrection of your government. And the reason why that's happened is because you've remained silent. And when you went and engaged that system, you didn't recognize that there was usurpers sitting in those places that you so-called voted in that you have to deal with as well. And there's a way to deal with that. I don't mean petition to recall. I mean, you just deal with them in the office. You start finding out that they do have an obligation and duty, and it's not to that legal entity. So as we talk about this corporate governmental imposition, treating you like the prisoners that you are, you're going to get that bologna sandwich, and we're not going to tell you where the meat came from or that it glows in the dark. You'll see that soon enough if you don't eat that meal. Night'll come. And you get to have these vaccines injected into you, and you don't get to escape that unless you put yourself in a little narrow place. And we're going to start herding you around, you herd immunity people. We're going to herd you all around by making different states have different impositions that you don't like. And all this is going on despite the evidence you could bring to bear to force the hand of these people that are trying to do this, that are not protecting you. And I'll remind you again, back in the beginning of the year, when that Italian court rules that mercury and aluminum in vaccine cause autism. Another report came on to remind us. The U.S. media continues a total blackout on the medical truth. Now, let's add the glyphosate problem, because that's probably, maybe even closer to the problem, as it seems there is evidence. If you don't select the common vaccine, you go to the special vaccine, and then you only do them for the ones you need over time, that there is evidence that doesn't harm you. Where if you go by the common multivalent vaccines, utilizing the therapies that they give you for GMO technology and their adjuvants, because they're probably weakened conditions, so they have to add more irritants to your system. Those are the ones that are causing trouble. That the Italian and International Court, if you're going to go international on this TPP and the TPIP, and they're able to say you can't know where your meat's from, and you can't know, you're not going to put pesticide poisoning on it. I'm wondering if you can't then now use the power now to come back and say, wait a minute, these things cause trouble. These vaccines are not the medium of public health that you're saying. Again, more evidence, I guess, is the point. While they bring on mandatory vaccines in California, causing people to have to literally consider pulling up stakes and going, which at some point, I don't know, maybe that's a good idea with all the water shortages that are going on, and that's planned. And they're looking to steal water from the north. That's also planned. That's what the Klamath problem with the Klamath dams is. Although you tell me, how are they going to get water once they blow the dam? The dam is the only reason why the fish are there. And if anybody doesn't understand that, you just need to research what that river does. In the summertime, without the dam, there's no water in that river. None. Unless the fish are taking up a bunch of sunscreen and sitting in the shade, they're not there normally in nature. That man's development actually makes the environment for those fish. The pulling of the dam, of which also drains the water, how is all this water that they're dealing with to be sent down south, how's that going to help anybody? But you see the insanity that no one steps up to fight. Not even really, not a fight, it's just an insanity. So you just have to point it out, and you bring out the fact that it's a criminal insanity, it's a felony. That then you look around, instead of these vaccines, and instead of pharma, if you're going to treat your little ones to a real education, something that really inspires them, something that doesn't have anybody's idea of what, Common Core involved at all, none of that stuff. You go to books that are way back in prior to 1970. Start back there with those. Go get some old books and start teaching your little ones about that type of reality. You might come across the fact that there's other things you can do for your health as well. And I ran across this little thing, and you figure out what you want here, folks, whether or not you want to be manipulated and have to run away, or whether you want to go educate your little ones on your own and not take a vaccine that they want that is poison. Maybe you can turn to other things and look at hygiene, because we know that's a big deal. Hygiene and nutrition, the glyphosate of which is sucking all the minerals out of. So you should be taking mineral supplements. Go find the best you can find. Get your mineralization back up, even so that we can protect, even if we're getting residual glyphosate, even though we're very careful on what we do. It's there in our food system now. It's almost impossible to find it there. But if you're looking for alternatives, a neat little story came up. Silver turns bacteria into deadly zombies. For those of you that want to rely on the zombie apocalypse, this is exactly what you might consider for yourself as a cure or health shield or a disease mitigator. The zombie apocalypse may be more than just a horror story for some bacteria. New research shows that when exposed to a microbe-slaying silver solution, the germs can go zombie, wiping out their living compatriots even after death. The results may explain silver's long-lasting antibacterial power and could improve the performance of medical products that keep us safe from harmful pathogens. Well, the medical products, folks, they made it a crime. They didn't want to agree to this. Back in the 30s, they knew about silver, remember? Here it is again, but now they're talking about looking at studies as to why. One germ that takes on silver and dies becomes the seed of destruction for others. It's like a sponge. That's a pretty interesting, and why it might work so well. It's pretty interesting dynamic. The use of silver in medicine dates back thousands of years, and scientists have long known that the metal is a potential antibacterial agent. Silver ions perform their deadly work by punching holes in the bacterial membranes and wreaking havoc once inside. They bind to essential cell components like DNA, preventing the bacteria from performing even the most basic functions. But silver's zombie effect has gone unrecognized until now. To uncover this grisly mechanism, scientists first killed a sample of the bacterium using a solution of silver nitrate. Then they carefully separated the dead bacteria from the silver solution. When they exposed living bacteria to the dead, they witnessed a microscopic massacre. Up to 99.9% of the living bacteria met their doom. That's pretty encouraging, isn't it? So as I was looking at it, I wonder, maybe you can make a bunch of bacteria, kill them off, and then just drink that solution. Maybe you'll have sponges of silver. Makes much better than you can make up on your own. Who knows? Using electron microscopy, the researchers imaged the dead bacteria and discovered what caused them to go into their killing spree. Reservoirs of silver nanoparticles have built up in their corpses, indicating that the dead bacteria are like sponges soaking up the silver as they die. The stored silver can leach out to the environment, quote, especially if the environment contains other sponges for that silver, says chemist David Avner of the Hebrew University Jerusalem, the senior author of the new study. In our case, the other sponge is a living bacterium. So, the reason why some of this silver might work, and something you might consider, is the sponging effect of the, remember now, it's a nanoparticle, so you need to be looking at creating solutions that are nano-sized in their ionic particles, which they should if you're doing it correctly. Anyway, so this is a neat story, a neat investigation, and I know some of you are all horrors because of where it came from. I don't really worry about that. It's either information that's true or it's not. You can verify it or it's not. And if you deny it because of its source, well, I'm sorry to hear that for you. For the rest of us who are looking for the people that are doing the research that we can trust, I'll take this with under advisement. I've already told you I have a silver generator design that I think, as I read through there, they were talking about the nanoparticle, and then it goes in and punches holes. Well, I've got a slightly different theory, and use that in how I generate it, and it's pretty interesting in how it works. There's quite a few different things that go on with those particles actually, and why they do what they do once they get in. So that the bacterium themselves, the dead ones, become sponges. That's a kind of a neat awareness if you understand. Start putting things into comprehensive purpose and use that you can enhance your own health by looking and applying these functions and these characteristics in what you do. And you'll begin to eliminate certain things that you were having to rely on the system for. And they hate that when you become self-reliant. Now, moving into the chemistry again, on Satan, suppressing science for Monsatan groups demand an investigation of the USDA. USDA is part and parcel to the sustainable development problem. They are susceptible to the International Horde of Trespassers and the IUCN. They are also, as a member, and they are also looking out for you by not harvesting your forests. And when your industry, your economies die, then they're right there to hand you food stamps. This group is this agency is what does that. And so 25 farm workers and environmental and food safety organizations sent an open letter to this United States Department of Agriculture demanding that the agency investigate reports that its scientists are facing retaliation and suppression of their research on controversial neonicotinoid insecticides that pose a danger to pollinator and human health. And even that's open. There's probably other things as well. The point is that I don't think you're going to be going to that agency, and they know their scientists are paid. So what's the point? The point for me, though, is that you do something in order to expose what's going on in these agencies that are supposed to be of the government for you. And this is going to be the shear line. Corporations may be people too, but they're actually not. And if you understand the underlying inherent authority in the state that overpowers this legal fiction, you're going to be positioned a lot better to address it. The point being also, without this pressure, it's not letting anybody know these conditions are there. And so sitting back and saying there's nothing you can do is really not an answer either. Not knowing where to begin, I have a problem with that as well. You have to just find something. However small, find something and just engage it. Because if you don't, it just comes over on us. Monsanto knew glyphosate, Roundup, cancer linked 35 years ago. More information coming out about this poison. Again, if you understand that it's a descaling, it's a metal binding, a metal element binding chemical, a very aggressive one. And then you understand that metal and the minerals underpin most of your bodily processes, you'll start to appreciate how wrong this is in the environment. Now we attach cancer. According to the evidence unearthed from the archives of the EPA in the United States, it has been established that Monsanto was fully aware of the potential of glyphosate to cause cancer in mammals as long as 1981. Now, I'm not going to rehash them. We've talked about all this stuff before. Different story, just different confirmation. When are some of you going to pick this up and actually go at the heart of it? Don't ask the USDA or somebody, EPA, to make the decision. You put together the formidable point and proof that this stuff is no good and get it outlawed. You flip the paradigm instead of we just go ahead and, we hasn't been any proof to show it's bad, to say, wait a minute, it is bad. Here's the proof. And upon the point I was talking before, what I was learning in a video last night about this very characteristic that this glyphosate is actually a mineral hogging, a mineral connecting, a mineral attaching, aggressive attachment for minerals in any system. This former pro-GMO scientist reveals secrets of years of research. He actually wasn't discussing GMOs more than only to the point that they say the GMOs were made to stop this process of the glyphosate mineral fixing in the plant structure, but that the real problem is this mineral fixing. He actually talked a whole lot more about that. It was kind of an eye-opener a bit to give you your own scientific knowledge. You're not talking about opinions here. I think it's hurting me. No, it's designed. It's got patents. You go look it up. Go get the evidence for yourself. Don't say you don't have an authority. Don't say you have nothing to do. And it's futile. Don't say that. How are you going to? Of course, it's futile if you say that. Let's put it that way. But here's the proof now. We didn't have it before. Kind of like talking about chemtrails before it was common, before it was admitted by the UN as being, even then there was geoengineering. Now, early on, I wasn't looking in the sky seeing that everything was a chemtrail, a persistent contrail. No, some of them were, and some of them still are. If you look up, you'll see contrails, literal contrails. Again, it's a stream out a jet engine at a certain part of the atmosphere. It probably lasts no longer than 15 seconds. That's max, and more like 3 to 5, 6 seconds. That's a contrail. Then they got this funky name, persistent contrails. That's chemtrails. That's geoengineering. When they finally admitted that, it was a paradigm shift now for people. So here we're having it now. Those of us that saw this glyphosate and then how this condition was working, though I didn't understand this mineral fixing, I understand it from a different way. This is another log on the pyre of this chemical, the sale of this chemical that you can now use that wasn't outright available to us. In fact, this video, he speaks toward why it's cancer causing, actually, which was pretty fascinating, and it has to do with its binding with that mineralization. The mineralization is what helps to defeat the cancer. You bind that mineral, and then the cancer can use the other things that it's around it, because it's not that poison part has been confined. It's been made inert. It's literally been made inert by a chemical that does a real good job at what it does. Just not in your body, folks. And this is the point that people are being fed up with, so much so that we get the news of quite a few weeks ago now, just tell as in the stream of these things here. Thousands of farmers in India rise up against Monsanto. Rising use against biotech giant known for causing suicides. This has to do with the financial lie that was going on around all that. Some have said that India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi arrived at the nation's pro-GMO position with the help of a generous campaign funding from the GMO lobby, but that hasn't stopped thousands of Indian farmers from demonstrating against Monsanto and their biotech cronies. Remember, they're not the only ones here, folks. Remember, the cronies are all there. They're all into it. All the Syngentas and all the Bayers and all the dye-chemical, all of those folks. Those folks that are under the costume of a corporation. It's not really the corporation either. It's these people that are in there that do this. Make excuses just to be able to puff their chest out and get big bonuses and make excuses about how they're not hurting anybody and denying how they are. The people start revolting. And this is revolting, so you should too. Against Monsanto and their biotech cronies in a massive grassroots movement that shuns anti-farmer practices and genetically modified crop farming. Well, like I said, you've got to look very carefully. Possibly some of the gene modifications that we don't have to consume, or that what we consume doesn't consume, may be okay. For the most part, I'm not so sure that I like any of it, and for the people that I look at that really have... It's kind of frustrating to see their arguments. They bring up nonsense arguments to try and justify this. They can't answer the most basic science behind this, the most basic problem about this, and then they'll vilify you about the genetic side of it, the invasion, the trespass upon the cell, the violation to the cell as you're doing this causes lots of responses by the cell that are not good for much of anything after that. That they're not addressing any of it, and then combined with this aggressive mineral absorption. And remember, I told you can do this if you do it correctly. I've told you if you think you have a mercury poisoning, start taking selenium. Go look it up. Go look up how selenium binds with mercury. It's just another element that binds with mercury. It's how it works. And so if you could just use these minerals for your benefit. But glyphosate is such a broad spectrum mineral binder. It's not used. It can't really. It's a death to life essentially, because your mineralization in the scheme of things affects literally every cell, and it's absorbed and stored in every cell that way as well. So the Indian farmers are having a tough time. The financial side of this, the benefits that have been promised by this technology have not come to fruition. To me, that's evidence that you can use to outlaw them and get them outlawed. Forget this nonsense about you think you're going to have regulations to see what's going on. You see the TPP pressure has removed in 2 instances. One is the infiltration of the international oversight over your nation, and the one is the internal withdrawal from pesticide regulation. You will have no ability to get at that by having a requirement to list it on your labels. So you have to ban it. As I've been saying for months and months and years and whatever. I mean, it's ongoing. It's the same story to me. That you have to understand, all these things that are dangerous to you. And there's a double-edged sword on this one, but I want to make you aware of it. Coming from the Catholic News Agency, Clue, is the pill contraceptive, the pill shrinking parts of women's brains? New report suggests yes. So, for those of you that are taking oral contraceptives, you may want to understand that a UCLA study has found that certain parts of a woman's brain are being adversely affected, that you may want to check into that. However, the other side of that sword is, it is the Catholic religion that wants to have more subjects. And so, while I noticed that they produced this UCLA report, they didn't produce the one about glyphosate. They didn't produce any of the problems with genetic modifications. They didn't produce the problem with climate change that the Pope's going to be writing an encyclical to embrace, which is all the points and parts of sustainable development, the global control of your life. So, I'll take this with a grain of salt. All you women doing contraceptives or oral contraceptives or know of somebody, you need to check this out. This could be serious. You need to really know. You need to just understand the risks, I guess, is the point there. Another thing that they tell us is no good. They, the experts, the government, keeping it from you, and it all looks now like it's supporting their own bottom line. Still, again, if you can regulate something down to control it, you have command over it. You can have command over the financing structure of it and the continuation of it wherever it wants to go, and then that's a monopoly of sorts that monopolies are very, very lucrative. Organized crime is can be very lucrative. And so another thing that goes on is another question that comes up now. As I've said, I'm not really versed in it, and I noticed there's been a lot of interest in this, but it's never been something in my life that I found or even was interested to try. But marijuana or cannabis, however word you want to use, doesn't matter to me. That over the last couple of years, and just watching the Rick Simpson, I think really turned the leaf over here. It was a pot leaf, as a matter of fact, he turned over. That started to put our attention back on. There's a real problem with this prohibition. This is no different than prohibiting alcohol. prohibition of marijuana as a natural plant, I was against it just for that. Not that I even found a need for it for myself. But it never made any sense to me. Well, now more information, folks, and this is, again, evidence. Bloodcaster's got all these stories to bring evidence to you. If this is your passion, then this is evidence to help you remove some of the monopolizing and the corporate monopolizing that's going on around marijuana. Expose the full story behind why marijuana is illegal and classified as a Schedule I drug. And they talk about the story, and those of you that are into it probably already know this. And a lot of us can, even though someone who's not involved, can see what it's about on the outward looking in. What got me even interested at all lately was finding out about the Rick Simpson, that there was actually, despite all the news about the fact of the lack of medical use, which I knew was just from a herbalistic standpoint was a lie, but I didn't have any proof, that he was for me the first one overtly able to make claims of curing. And now there's so much coming in, and now we define it, not the THC, but the CBN or whatever the heck the other oil is, that's the one that's doing the CBDs or whatever. That's the one that's doing all the curing. That people are now focusing on that. That when I saw it that way, you recognize the government crime again. But this is a story on how it came about that you can expose was the illegal part, the fabricate, the fraud that was done. And you see again, it's from the pharmaceutical industry. The Comprehensive Act required the pharmaceutical industry to maintain physical security and strict record keeping for certain types of drugs. It's classified drugs in 5 different schedules. Schedule 1 being the hardest drug based on their potential for use, which is underlined in the Act. Current accepted medical use and accepted safety use medical supervision. Marijuana was classified as a Schedule 1 drug by the pharmaceutical industry, claiming the drug had no proven medical benefits and is an addictive and dangerous drug. And I won't go on and on. I've reported behind the woodshed of the patents that the government has, the United States government has over the use of this. So all I was pointing really, I focused again, well, here it is again, folks, more evidence. It was industry, like the monopoly barons of bygone past, the railroads and the energy, all the same types of players going on, that we have to really start focusing on and stopping. Because here's from my perspective, if this herb is not just from this one standpoint, but now that it's shown, obviously, to help people end their pain, end disease in their life, and you're looking at an industry and a government that allows the withholding of that, how can you live with yourself? Come on. What harm is it really? What is the public good? Have you thought about asking these questions this way? Because that's how you speak to the power. I'm asking us to speak a little better truth to power, but the facts and the evidence, and exposing the lie, exposing the fraud, exposing the omission of the truth as a felony. As I keep telling you, it's in the law. These people are using this authority as a color of authority to define your life, and they don't have title to do that. And I think if we started getting these words in our vocabulary, these phrases, this awareness, the way you communicate that, we're going to gain that awareness everyone thinks they have today. In fact, I found it kind of funny. There was how many people are aware? How many people are awake? Awake. That was what it was. Awake. And what can I tell you, folks? What is that word? Awake. My first response was, well, okay, that might be awake in the context of being aware. How many people, just on the example of sleeping and coming awake, how many people are getting out of bed? You might be awake. That phase when you're just waking up and you come awake and you're still laying there on the bed? That's where we are. You might be awake, but you ain't got up out of bed and put your pants on. I'm asking us to do that. Get beyond just the wake. Let's get it and let's start functioning. Okay, you might have to have a cup of coffee. I'll give you that. Get the coffee. We got work to do. But here's a situation that really kind of angers me a bit. given that all the examples that we're now seeing that people are no longer in pain or in suffering or disease, and they're now living that freer, more healthy existence, whatever the reason why they got what they got, and this herb stops that we have not turned around and say, listen, this is nonsense what you're doing, you're going to stop it. Because by not doing that, you're actually doing the fraud of felony for so aiding and abetting another fraud, which is the pharmaceutical industry, claiming not to cure but to continue and gain profit from derivatives. We the people have had enough of that. We're stopping that. That has no actual public purpose. The fiction of the bottom line is not public purpose enough for us. We're no longer going to stand for it. Now, you can't be awake laying in bed and stand. You have to get out of bed, folks. So the question to me was kind of in a way it was fun. It was a chuckle. How many people are awake? As if the one who's asking it is awake. I don't know, folks. When you start looking around, there's a whole lot we're not awake about, even though we think we are. And then I realize you can't just be awake. You got to get up out of bed. You got to put your pants on, and then you got to go out and do something. So we got a long way. Just being awake isn't much. I can just tell you that. Because, I mean, when I became awake, my head spun around on the initial set. I was, oh, wow, I'm awake. I'm not sleeping no more. And then I realized how big the job was. I had to pull the covers off. I had to sit up in bed. I had to find my pants, put my shoes on, get dressed for the day, get up, get my coffee, and then proceed to take to task what startled me out of my slumber. I'm asking us to do that. I think we can. I really do. But there's a whole story here. Blogcaster will have it for you on how to proceed, an evidence on how to, beginning to how to proceed to bring the sanity back and give people the tools they need to live within that happiness. And I'm not talking about the New Age happiness, and I'm not talking about the sustainable development happiness that you'll hear the government talk about. That's another trap they're going to set you into. Forget that. That was the happiness was about enjoying property of your making. So, getting beyond all that into how to protect yourself against the plunder that goes on, the monopoly that goes on, return us back to, and found another discussion about, I didn't realize this then, and that's why I want to bring it on to you, a lawyer. The people, the scourge, well, actually, a scourge of the attorneys. Those actual lawyers, which I think are very rare, the ones that actually do the law and understand what that's about, really can be helpful. And to show you, I'm not totally prejudiced against the bar members. I know 3 of them that are friends of mine. That, well, I guess I'd say they were lawyers, and they did the law. When they got in, they did the law, and they're friends of mine. So I'm not totally prejudiced to the race of lawyers, as you find a Doubleday dictionary what the definition of race is. For all you people thinking that Ferguson's the only race of people that are getting killed, only race of people getting beat down. No, there's a race of lawyers out there, attorneys that do this, that beat on everybody, plunder everybody, support these corporations, make this legal fiction of this legal analysis that has no basis. It's all adjunct policy and not constitutional within the confines. But there's a lawyer out there, one guy who was doing the law to help you, say, here's the way the structure works, and this is what you have to know. The lawyer signs raise questions about Dewey checkpoints. It's now known. I remember talking about the Dewey, the Bag-O law for the Deweys in Florida. I thought it was for me, he's probably never heard of me, the Fair Dewey, remember? We talked about that. This was actually a criminal attorney that set that up, and he's the guy that puts the sign that you have printed out, and it's state by state. You have to know your state's laws, and they're working on more states apparently. I remain silent, no searches, I want my lawyer, in big bold print. And then he's got a bunch of statutes that fortify that. He doesn't, in this case, in the picture I'm looking at, he doesn't use the bag of law hanging out his window when he goes to this the Dewey checkpoint. He actually has the sign he's holding up from the inside, and he's holding his license up with his finger over apparently some information. that's on it, probably his name and address. Whether or not it was for the picture or for the cop, I don't know. But he has got the window shut. Why? Because he understood that you crack that window, cops, being criminals that they are, will claim they smell alcohol in order to get probable cause to get you to open that door even further. His remedy was don't open that window at all. You can assert your rights through a piece of paper hanging on the shoved up against the window. Identify yourself as a driver with a driver's license, for those of you who have that, and then you proceed in silence. And then they have to figure out how to get you an attorney so that you can speak. So I thought it was a brilliant use of as originally constructed for him was a bag of law. He had his bag was holding his license, and his title and his insurance. In this picture, he's not showing all the rest of that. He's just saying, "I remain silent, no searches, I want my lawyer." And that actually makes sense to me, instead of doing the title and all of that stuff, because the other stuff is going to incriminate you anyway. Keep putting all that stuff out there. He's got his finger over his name for another reason. I think maybe he's looked at that and talked a little bit about to himself and said, okay, I'm even speaking when I give all this information out. I'm only going to give enough, just barely enough. As I tell you, don't speak enough that you start to condemn yourself. You have to remain silent. So another story came out, how you can help defend yourself. I think the method is brilliant. Not because it adopted my bag of law. I think that's just what you come to. That's just a tool you come to defend yourself against the ongoing criminality, where the state now has become it has always been, but now it's more obvious. It's your master. That you live in an open-air prison. You aren't going to travel unless they let you. You're only going to eat what they tell you to eat, and it's going to come down. Probably they'll eat when they tell you to eat, because that's scarcity will come upon you. You only have what you have, and you won't. At some point, you won't even care where it's coming from if it gets that scarce, will you? But even when you have enough, you won't even get to know where that food's coming from. It's not food; it's feed. It's what they're making for you, and when you can't find out where that food comes from, you will then experience, I believe, you'll experience the movie Soylent Green, and won't be able to prove it. Upon vaccines, still, going back, a nurse reveals routine vaccine-induced injury from current schedule at hospitals. Speaking back to what can you do, is there technology out there that is right, that you can do, and what is the problem? I told you it's possible, because we've heard there's multi-levels of quality of vaccines. They give you the garbage, and let's say the chosen ones get the real nice ones. They actually do them right. They don't have a bunch of nonsense in them. They don't have all the poisons. They don't have all the things coming from derivative type bioorganisms. They probably don't have human fetal tissue in them as an adjuvant to get you reactive, to cause something in you that you can go down the road to get to need more pharmaceuticals. But it was upon this schedule, how many vaccines that you get. The battle rages in the United States on citizens' fight to keep vaccine exemptions on slippery slope pointed away from the medical freedom. Pharmaceutical-funded lobbyists are making no effort to conceal their agenda as they coat Senate committees like wet blankets covering truth. The trend is moving fast away from the public power as senators represent their voters. In California and Vermont, it has been confirmed that the community, because of its strong opposition, is simply no longer able to testify on the record. Any whisper of the possibility of endless stacked parents rejecting votes sees immediate postponement and a committee meetings to be removed by options. This is what I was telling you before, and it feeds into the thing I was telling you. Just recall, that's what the word is, not withdraw, but recall the senators. Don't let them act. Work in your local government to get that to happen. Now, this report goes on. Cheryl Atkinson was doing the report, and she's talking to a nurse, and the nurse from experience is talking about the vaccine schedules that they do in hospitals is actually more evidence to say that's the problem. And I've talked to you about this and done the reports, and well, actually, I think it was a science report I reported on about the case. In other words, giving you the information on how to intelligently approach this problem. The problem is information, isn't it? And getting quality information. So here's another report. If you want to know how to identify what's going on, which condition is the problem that's causing the problem, and to take the best of what's available, not just take what you gave, like those civil rights, the right to pay exactions of every kind and no other, Title 42, Section 1981. USC 42, Section 1981, they'll tell you that, folks. It's just right in the law. You only get the rights you gave if you continue to ask for civil rights. And that happens to be them caring for you as a ward by their schedule, by their ingredients, by their rules, and by their control. And that brings them into power. So you got a bunch of people that are psychopaths and sociopaths. They have to maintain power, and that's the problem. That's why they don't want you to be independent. And this is now, as people start engaging all this, as I've kind of come to my own terms with it, that you have to engage, and it's not about fear, it's about action. That someone else, and someone who was involved in that Bundy ranch thing, getting engaged, brought an insight. And I guess this is the only thing I was seeing about this, really. It says, do not fear the government. What I've learned from Bundy Ranch. And the whole point for me was, and I haven't gotten too deep in Bundy. There's a legitimacy about the Bundy claim on title. There's a violation outright on the BLM. Absolutely. We've been involved with that all the time. I can show you that the courts are corrupt, the wrong court of jurisdiction. But what I was encouraged by was someone engaging that and coming away with what was powerful. Do not fear the government. The main lesson I have learned from the Bundy Ranch saga so far are that when we let go of fear, we win. And the government actually fears us as it was meant to. And when we give in to fear, we lose. And I'll stop there. That's the whole point. You have to engage. And you have to continue the engagement. This is literally a war. There's an occupied forces all over the place, different agendas all over your life. And to remain silent on it, it will make it and cause them, like California, they're going to make this, they're talking about it, removing exemptions, and people are literally going to be moving no different than as if a war had broke out in the town of Homs, Syria. Refugees now come out as if a bomb, chemical attack happened. This is a bio attack happens in California. Refugees are coming out of California. If you didn't think that we weren't in a battlefield America, I hope I said it now. I'm hoping you picked that up before. In fact, I'm hoping the chat. I can't do the chat too well, but hoping a lot of you guys are pretty sharp, and you girls are pretty sharp in there. You always have these little comments I notice after that sometimes are more enlightened than what I came up with in the moment. But this is what I'm trying to get at. I don't say sometimes. This is the mirror of the Middle East on us. In California, these things that are dropping on us are like bombs, bio bombs, pharma bombs, and they're causing people to migrate and move, and that's what they want. They want the people destabilized. Why I'm so focused on getting all of us focused in doing something, and we focus our attention locally, and get the system to find out it's divided instead of us being divided. But lose that fear. Just address the problem. And when you do that, like I say, you go to the black and white. You get that objective basis. Nobody has the knowledge that you do when you do that. All these people are just opportunists in the office for the most part. It's an ego thing, or they're a psychopath, or they're a sociopath. They had no thought that they actually had a constraint. And then you bring the constraint, not your opinion, the objective basis, the things in law. And it's there. And they have a ton of trouble with it, and then hopefully you got enough people that you started showing that then you win the day eventually by bringing it slowly over time. You become someone that's self-reliant. Why the government is so afraid of the self-reliant was another story that I found weeks ago. And I'm just going to offer it to you for you to read. Insights, if you haven't thought about it. It's not just self-reliant in providing for yourself, but it's in action. It's in countering, as it says right here. The short answer is that our government and many like it are parasitic in nature. You have to actively engage the parasite. You got to pluck it off. You can't let it sit there and suck on you or get the minions to suck from you. So you lose the fear, you turn around and you address the problem. And when you do that, I can only tell you, folks, I know I wish I could just convey to you right through the ether here the things I've seen and what that does to people when you come with a knowledge and an authority without fear. It's not an arrogance. That's the other interesting thing. I don't really have to tell people how much I know. That just comes out. I'm not saying stuff just to show you how much I know. I'm saying things on a point. I'm trying to explain or educate a point, or I'm trying to cause a warning, or I'm trying to get us quickly to the point so we can move on and get on with our lives. And that ends up turning into a knowledge base that is very formidable. And when you have a knowledge base, then you're going to have what appear to be a little more intelligence. It's not, because it's just applied knowledge, than the other guy who could care less or was there on his ego or her ego or their agenda. So self-reliance is going to be important. The government fears it because then they, again, can't control you. When they have this TPP and TPIP, when they can command foreign veneer governments to act contrary to the will of their people, the better nature of their and the needs of their people, you have to know you're up against a formidable foe. And fearing not, nonetheless, that you step up. And that's just the presence of that. The reason why they're trying to keep this thing transparent to you and not allow it open is because they know as soon as you find out and get knowledge, you'll know exactly what to take out. What I'm looking at is, well, since they're doing that, they're just proving that they can't make the decision. Let's just take them out right now. Let's take the whole thing out. Let's recall the senators from the Senate. Every state recalls their Senate because they're not fulfilling your needs as people. Again, senators. It seems like this is the senators. Going on to another aspect of this. We were talking about this silent weapons, quiet wars, and the data, big data, and the information that they need from all this. And every time you tie into the government, they're going to have an application of some sort for you to get those services. Like you see Obamacare, you have to do certain things they tell you. And you'll have to fill out forms, and if you don't, your employer's going to fill out forms, and then that'll tattle on you. And so you get locked in this defeated, you're defeated before you get going. And it's all based on this information. And again, the Senate stopped this USA Freedom Act, which would have scrapped the NSA bulk collection of data. Now, there was an interesting argument that said, well, part of it wasn't really scrapping it at all, and that's why they're going to vote out. They didn't vote on it. But this is where you can step up now, where they didn't do that. Again, if we get rid of these senators, see, they're acting to start all this. If they're recalled from their position, they can't act on all this. But even so, if they're there and you can respond to a lot of this and ask them, how are they serving your interests? And expose the lies. Expose how this works. But the USA Freedom Act, which is supposed to limit the Patriot Act authorities, was not agreed to by the Senate for that. And so that gives us the idea, well, they want bulk collection. Well, we could say that. But remember, and this is where I think the advocacy should come in even better, let's, like we did at the Ron Paul times, blaze the phone lines and the emails and the letters, write your letters, because this Patriot Act, there has sunshine provisions that are coming due, I think, on June 1st, that you can browbeat the senators into not acting on that, and some of this falls away anyway, as we hear that the NSA is winding down a once secret phone call collection program. That ain't happening actually, but this is what they want you to know. And this is what would actually happen if that sunshine hits that act and the Patriot Act provisions are eliminated because they weren't reanimated by the Senate. So call and contact your everybody you can, browbeat these people into not considering re-engaging the Patriot Act, and bring up all the reasons, and fraud, and the terrorism that doesn't happen. The fact that the representation isn't for you. Because, well, NSA surveillance is worse than you've ever imagined. In another report, as we go on, we can sit here and be quiet about it, or we can at least try to act and get on the record somewhere that it's not serving us. Last summer, after many months of encrypted emails, I spent 3 days in Moscow hanging out with Edward Snowden on a Wired cover story over pepperoni pizza. He told me that what finally drove him to leave his country and would become a whistleblower was the conviction of the National Security Agency was conducting illegal surveillance on every American, which we've known that story. The problem is that there's more programs like Treasure Map now that are getting into your systems. It's now becoming admitted. You download an update. That actually could be something that has a backdoor in it. Issues coming up with something bigger than what was Heartbleed. Venom, security vulnerability threatens most data centers. Entire data centers are threatened. Now, some of this has been captured, and some of it can be controlled a bit and protected against. But again, you're tying into the system that they're using to monitor you, to get you to be the herd that runs where they want you to run. You become the refugee, like the people with vaccines in California. You get tied into this digital lifestyle, and the digital money, no money at all, just electrons, and the idea that maybe they can turn you off. Folks, a little story came by. Google's Phantom algorithm update hits websites. They did the update, and just on this algorithm, websites were losing traffic 22% overnight. Consider that is you being tied into a system, and somebody pushes a button in an algorithm and says, you don't get any more money. You don't get your digits this month. You were outspoken too much on these things that we don't want to see happen. To show you that we have to withdraw, and we have to start moving, becoming active in protecting ourselves in this digital world, the Internet of Things that they keep giving us. We've got to stop. EFF withdraws support for the USA Freedom Act after last week's court ruling. Remember those court rulings that came down that were showing the illegalities in Section 215 of the Patriot Act. Present that to your senator, or the guy who's representing himself as your senator. But the EFF withdraws its support when they started thinking about how this thing is all going to work. It's not working the way we think it works with the way this legislation and the plunder that goes on. I've been trying to tell you about that. Be careful, like labeling. Oh, we want to do labeling. Well, the problem with that is that the Monsatans of the world were actually giving their attorneys to write the language to it. So if you agreed to it, 80% of the products of which would be exempted underneath that law. You're not going to get them labeled anyway. This is how all these acts work. You have these attorneys, these bar members behind the scenes doing what they can in order to advance the state and the corporate structure, the bottom line, that we really have to get a handle on. And if we don't, we'll be handled by it. Pretty simple. And I know it's a lot. I go 2 hours of nonstop stuff, and I go on and on. In fact, I didn't reach all the end of my tabs again. I could go on for another 2 hours probably, just talking about things. Never really get to anything in substance. MarkOnTheBeachYahoo.com if you have something. But you know better than me about what you're interested in and what you don't like and what you want changed. I hope today I'm giving you quite a bit of information on at least throw your hat in the ring and do something. I mean, even if it's just attacking the Senate right now. I think it'd be a hoot. Wouldn't it be a hoot just to have the senators in the states recalled? Now let's get beyond the thought, the fairy tale. Let's actually get something done like that. Let's rally up. Let's get some people to organize. Thank you very much for tuning in today. Looks like we're going to be about ended here. You take care. Support all the networks that you can. WT, WorldTruth.org. Maybe join up a social network. Real Liberty Media. Hand Grimner a donation or two for his excellent website and maintenance of what he does and out of his pocket. UCY.TV and FM broadcast. Appreciate it all. Take care.
Well, that's another lesson. I hope with today's information you can take it to those that misbehave. From behind the woodshed, leaving his mark on the beast, this is Hal Anthony. Till next time, journey with purpose.